Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. It is Friday, August the 30th. It is the last Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show before the rosters expand to 28. Not as exciting as it used to be, Zach, when the rosters would expand to 40. I'm surprised they didn't. You know what I always thought they should do? I thought what made sense is expand the rosters to 30. 40 was always too much. I say expand the rosters to 30, but only 26 guys are active each game. So in other words, your four other starting pitchers, I guess that doesn't really matter because you're not going to use those guys unless there's some sort of crazy 18 inning emergency anyway. But that's what I always thought. I don't know why they went all the way down to 28. I would have liked 30, but it is what it is.
I understood. When you had 40, it was like a different brand of baseball.
Right. It was too much.
But there is something to be said about encouraging teams to call up their young prospects,
right,
who weren't called up earlier in the season. And maybe for those teams that are out of the race, you can keep fans engaged a little bit in September when football starts. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm with you. I think 2 pitchers and 2 position players, I think is the perfect number.
Good.
But you get one of each.
Our Guardians fans still engaged for the final 31 days of the season, 27 games, 31 days. We'll get into the salvaging of the final game of the Royal Series, and then did that potentially save the season, or at least save their chances of winning the division? The Pirates coming in, and then a road trip ahead. All coming up on today's Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. Zach, we know last time we were on together was Monday. The Guardians came off a good weekend in which they had won 2 of 3 against Texas. And we knew it was a huge series going into Kansas City, coming in, against Kansas City here in Cleveland. They're going to Kansas City this coming week. It went about as poorly as it could for the first 2 days and 3 games. I think we were both kind of concerned about that doubleheader. We didn't like those pitching matchups, and it did not go their way. Gavin Williams continued to struggle on Tuesday as they lost, and then they win the final game of the series. Let's start first before we get to how big that last game was. Let's start with the first 3 games and them dropping the first 3 to move it at the time into a tie with Kansas City. What stood out to the most to you in those 3 losses?
Yeah, I thought the Royals looked really familiar. I'm watching these games and how aggressive they were. The pitching was good. And I thought to myself, wait, this is the Guardians team I watched for the first few months. The Royals looked like the energized team, the hungry team, the aggressors. And that's the style of baseball I think Cleveland's gotten away from for the last 2 months. So it was weird. That doubleheader, I thought the pitching deployment was really strange.
That it was.
I tried to press Stephen Vogt about it, but every answer is just so vague and not really going to give you much insight. Everything was their plan, and they just didn't execute. And but it was weird. That first game, it's like, okay, like they actually got to Cole Reagans a little bit.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, though, it's a 1-run. Eli Morgan gives up the home run.
Did you think they left him in too long?
It's easy to hindsight.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
He had breezed through the first 2 innings and 20 pitches, so that wasn't an issue. That's just my question, though, is like, what were you trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
If you were going to go bullpen game and you weren't going to use Joey Cantillo unless you had to, then why didn't you use your best relievers? Why am I looking up and Eli Morgan's trying to complete a 3rd inning? And why am I looking up and it's a 1-run game and Connor Gillespie's pitching?
Yeah.
That I never understood that.
Yeah.
And yet that's the answer I got.
Yeah.
That was the plan. How we deployed them is how we wanted to. So it's weird. You go a bullpen game 1, but you're going to save your best relievers for game 2. Like it was really strange.
Yeah.
And like Hunter Gaddis, he missed with 1 pitch, and he's done that like 3 times in 60 appearances. So you can't even. And he gave it up to Bobby Witt. Like, how are you going to be upset about that? But it just seemed like, one team's stars played really well.
That's it.
And the others didn't. And
And that's
The
been the
Royals are
overall
good.
and that's been the overall difference, right? Like Bobby Witt and Salvador Perez, those guys were just, I mean, Bobby Witt wasn't for Aaron Judge would be winning an MVP this year,
Yeah.
probably. I mean, he's just having a magnificent season. Salvador Perez never seems to get old. I don't know what is with this guy. I mean, I think they've been very smart, not having him catch too much anymore these days. Plays first, he plays DH, whatever. Obviously Pasquantino, but and they're getting contributions from their bottom, because their bottom half of the lineup is not great either. But they're, you mentioned before when you started this about the first 3 games that they looked like what the Guardians looked like earlier in the season. And it's funny that you said it, because I was thinking the exact same thing. Like that in the beginning of the year, we were like, oh, the Guardians are so much fun to watch. And lately they haven't been fun to watch at all. But the Royals are really fun to watch right now, because Bobby Witt is electric, and Perez and Vinny Pasquantino, and they have 3 catchers playing in every game, it seems. They got Melendez, who was a catcher, now he's playing all over the field, and
He's
Perez
pretty bad in left field.
He is, but like they're like, well, whatever, he can hit.
Yeah.
So we'll live with it. And listen, they have better starting pitching than the Guardians do. There's no doubt. And their bullpen's gotten better. It was awful early in the season. It's still not great, but it's better. There's no doubt about that. Urseg's done a nice job at the back end of the pen. And I agree. I didn't understand the pitching decisions, and I don't know. Those answers from Stephen Vogt, I don't know how you deal with it, but
he did. He had some good answers, I thought, Tuesday night, because I would not let that press conference end.
Yeah, right.
After the third loss to Kansas City, and I want to get something out of him, because I'm tired. I know fans are tired of the stay the course and
right. Nobody wants to hear
panic.
that.
There's no sense of urgency, and it's like, I understand a manager needing to show composure and be even keel, and I understand even the players needing to project that.
Yeah,
but there's a balance here between wanting to stay grounded and focused on the day at hand and not putting too much pressure on yourself, and also showing that, like, this is unacceptable, and that
right.
and it's not even so much, I don't even care about the words. I think that's the frustrating thing, when fans are like frustrated by what they're hearing in these post-game press conferences or whatever. It's that's not the issue. The issue is that nothing has changed.
That's right.
There have been no changes to the lineup. There have been no roster moves. There have been no changes in strategy. And how long do you have to watch uninspiring baseball before you decide, you know what? I know we said that this group of guys is going to dictate how this season goes, and we got to stay the course, but maybe we need to mix things up.
Yeah.
Like, how often do we say that? What's the definition of insanity? It's trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And it's a good thing they got that series finale, because otherwise I just don't know how you can explain yourself.
Chase DeLauder red hot. Kyle Manzardo homered last night. Anyway, we've talked that to death. Let's get to the final game of the series. So after the Tuesday game, the teams are tied. The Royals have the tiebreaker. So technically, the Royals were the division leaders at the moment.
First time in 4.5 months.
Yeah. I mean, unbelievably. You go to the bottom of the 7th of the final game of the series. The Royals have a 5-2 lead. And at that point in the game, I'm like I'm not even locked in, because I'm so frustrated watching this team. I'm like, the game's over. I got it on, but I'm not, usually I'm living and dying with every pitch. I got it on. I'm sitting there. I'm on my phone a little bit, because I'm like, this just sucks. I had no thoughts at all that they were going to come back. I don't know how you felt. And then Bo Naylor hits the home run. And, we talked about he, amongst many other guys who have not been doing particularly well. And that, piqued my interest, and I locked back in from there. And of course they rallied for the big 7th inning. And as I look back on it, well, who knows? They could lose a series to the awful Pirates for all I know. But by winning that game, rallying back, and being back up in first by a game instead of down by a game, and essentially down by a game and a half because you don't have the tiebreaker. And now the Royals lose last night, so it's 1.5. If the Guardians do get on a little bit of a roll here and end up winning the division, I think we may very well look back to that 7th inning Wednesday night as what got them on track and won them this division ultimately, because that was beyond huge, that rally.
It was, and I'll agree with you in the premise that this series is critical because this weekend against Pittsburgh and in a week and a half against Chicago are like your the two series you have left where you can breathe.
You have to sweep.
Yes.
None of this nonsense.
Right. So if you can parlay that win on Wednesday into feeling better about yourself, enjoying the off day, playing some golf, and then getting back to it for the Pittsburgh series, and you can turn this into a 4-game winning streak, sure. Because guess what? Monday afternoon, you're in Kansas City against that Royals team, who, by the way, has had like one of the best offenses in baseball in their home ballpark. Their splits are insane. That's why I thought if the Royals were going to win 3 in a row against Cleveland, I thought it'd be in Kansas City, not in Cleveland. But it's, yeah, I mean, this has become, it's crazy. It's like a game of keep away. I mean, they're truly just trying to run away from the Twins and the Royals, and they caught a break. Like the Twins are really sputtering right now too.
Yep.
The Royals are in Houston. This is a
it's tough.
4-game series that they've got that started last night. So,
and that game was tied late in the 7th or the 8th. I think it was 4-4, and then or 3-3, and then the Astros got
6-3 was the final, I think.
Yeah.
So this is a chance to create a little bit more breathing room, just so you don't have all this pressure again going into KC and then at the Dodgers. But I think it speaks to a bigger thing, though, that, I mean, you said it. There's, 28 games left in the season? 20?
Yeah, 28.
28 games left. Every single one is going to feel important.
Right.
You know, you can say everyone is just one of 162, but you get to this point and you're leading the division is that narrow. Like there should be a pep in your step. There should, this is why you struggled last season to be able to play games like this. This is why you traded Aaron Savali midseason. This is why, I mean, I know they haven't used Kyle Manzardo, but you made the moves you made hoping you'd be better in a year. You know, you went out and made trades that haven't paid off, but you did that midseason so that you would be better equipped to win games like this. So, you know, they haven't played well, and I'm not going to excuse them for how they've played or how they've managed things, because it's mind-boggling, it's head-scratching, it's kind of nonsensical that they haven't been more aggressive. I mean, they were making moves left and right early in the season when they were winning, and now they've stopped. It's bizarre, but you got to do everything you can here every single day. This is supposed to be what's fun. I mean, you're in a pennant race.
Yeah, and let's look at the rest of the schedule for a minute here. So obviously this 3-game series at home against Pittsburgh, and then a long road trip. You got a 9-game road trip with a day off in the middle. 3 at KC we talked about, then 3 at the Dodgers. Nobody's playing better baseball than them. You go from playing maybe the best team in baseball, the Dodgers, to the worst team in baseball, the White Sox.
Baseball history.
Yeah. I mean, they're getting there. And then after that, like if they could survive that road trip, especially Kansas City and the Dodgers, then they're at home for 13 of their last 16 games, which is crazy. I mean, that's a huge benefit of the schedule. I know they haven't been for the first half of the year, they were completely dominant at home, and that hasn't been the case as they've struggled more in the second half. But your only road series after this road trip that ends in Chicago is a quick trip to St. Louis. And the Cardinals aren't. And you look at the rest of the schedule. Obviously, yes, the White Sox and Pirates are the 2 easy series. And you have challenging series big time with Kansas City, the Dodgers, and Twins. The Rays, and Astros. The Rays, Cardinals, and Reds are kind of in the middle. So you got 4 really tough series. Kansas City, Dodgers, Twins, Astros. 3 against mediocre teams in the Cardinals, Rays, and Cincinnati, and then 2 easy series against the White Sox and Pirates.
Where do you think those teams would put the Guardians in your tier system?
It's a great question. I think right now, I think a lot of those teams will put the Guardians in the mediocre part.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, they've been it since what, the beginning of July, really, or sometime in early July. They've been a mediocre team.
Yeah, I just wonder if the Cardinals are looking at their schedule and they're thinking, all right, we get Cleveland in here for 3
Right.
games. Maybe we can sweep that one or definitely win 2 or 3.
I wonder if other teams, like especially a team you don't play often, like St. Louis or Cincinnati or Pittsburgh, like are they just seeing the Guardians' record and they're like, wow, they're really good? Or, I mean, are they breaking, do you think that the average player on those teams has any idea that the Guardians have played pretty poorly for the last 2 months?
Players, probably not.
Yeah.
Coaches, scouts,
Yes, certainly.
certainly have a good idea of it.
Yeah. All right, quick break. Let me talk to you folks about the Game Time app. So I'm heading to Cincinnati for Monday Night Football in a few weeks. The Bengals are hosting Washington. And in the past, I would have bought the tickets earlier, right? Weeks before. But on the Game Time app, the closer you get to the game, the better deal you get. So I'm going to wait till a day or two before. I'm going to hit up the Game Time app and I'm going to get a great deal. Concerts, baseball, whatever you're looking for, check it out on the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed with the Game Time app. All right, Zach. So with the Pirate, not only do you have the Pirates coming in, it's funny because they catch a break that they're not facing Skeens, and to some degree, Jared Jones, who throws real hard too, just came off the injured list. But it would also be cool, I think, for fans to get to see Skeens in person. But I think in the end, you'd rather not face the better pitcher. They'll go with Bailey Falter, Luis Ortiz, and Mitch Keller. Probably the best thing about the Pirates is their starting rotation. Their starting rotation is not bad. The rest of their team, I mean, their bullpen's been a disaster. Their lineup's not very good.
Well, that's the thing. Can we see Skeens knowing that he pitched against your Cubs and he was okay, and then he left, and the Cubs bullpen gave up 11 unanswered runs?
Pirates, yeah. Yes. That's true. We could do that because they don't let him go too deep into games anyway. So it would be fun.
Yeah,
fun to see in person.
Yeah, there was a time when I thought David Bednar would have been a really nice addition for Cleveland's bullpen. He's been horrible.
It's funny. It's another example of why Clase is so special. Now, and maybe he'll fall off a cliff next year. We can't explain it. You never know. But closers are so fragile. And most closers, even a lot of the really good ones, will be good for just a couple of years, and that's it. Like David Bednar for the last couple of years looked like one of the best closers in baseball. And as you said, and he's been hurt a little this year. I don't know how much that's been a factor, but he's been terrible this year. He got clobbered in that game. And you see it all the time. A guy's a great closer. 3 years later, he's at a 5 ERA. I mean, and so the guys that do it for a long time, and I don't think at this point it's fair enough to say that Clase has done it for a long time, but when you have the guys like Craig Kimbrell, even though he's kind of shot at this point, but he was a good closer for a long time. Kenley Jansen, certainly Mariano Rivera and Trevor Hoffman. To have a closer be great for that long, it's such a huge advantage because there's just so few guys that do it. When I play fantasy baseball, I almost never draft a closer high because by the middle of the season, there's 10 guys at least that are closing who you had was not even on the radar. Right now, I'm about to win my championship in my fantasy baseball league. My closers right now are Calvin Fauché of the Marlins. Was Victor Vodnik of the Rockies, who just got hurt, and now yes, exactly. And I have Edwin Uceta, who's closing for Tampa Bay. And I do have, and then the biggest name I have is Sir Anthony Dominguez, who's closing for Baltimore. None of those guys were closing 6 weeks ago. None of them. And, and that's my closers on a team that's in first place in fantasy. So never draft closers high.
And it's probably a good time to mention then that Emmanuel Clase pulled into a tie with Cody Allen with 149 saves, most in franchise history, which is insane because he's 26 years old. I mean, he could double that number. He could triple it in time.
Yeah.
And it's, he was that trade. I don't know why I remember that. I remember the winter meetings came and went. There was a lot of Kluber noise.
Yeah.
Suggestions that he would be traded. He wasn't. And then I think it was a Sunday afternoon. I think the Browns game was over. It was the 4:00 window, and that trade came down. And I'll never forget seeing Emmanuel Clase and Delino DeShields in the trade.
Yeah.
And then thinking, what else? And I remember checking with a few different people and like, okay, so is there a player to be named or what's going on here? And that was it.
That was it.
And I remember talking to people who were very high on Clase. And the Mariano Rivera comparison was thrown out there more so because it was the cutter was his main pitch and really the only pitch he needed. But you can't compare someone to the only unanimous Hall of Famer in league history, right? So then, of course, he gets suspended for the 2020 season, and you're thinking, what was this trade? And Kluber pitched 1 inning for Texas and got hurt and then left. So it seemed like a complete waste for both sides. Delino DeShields did nothing in his 1 season in Cleveland. And then 2021 comes, and like he had an encouraging first half. Like there were some good signs there. I think we all were wondering, like, you throw 100 miles an hour, where are the strikeouts?
Yep.
And then he and Karinchak were kind of flip-flopping for the first half. And then Clase took over after the All-Star break as closer, and that was that.
Yeah.
I think he had a long stretch of scoreless outings in the second half that season. His ERA was 1.29, and after that, there were no questions. And then he comes back the next year. His ERA is 1.36. He leads the league in saves. He's an All-Star, and I think he won the Rolaids reliever, or whatever it's called now, for the American League. Actually, it might be the Mariano Rivera Award.
I think they did change it to that appropriately.
And it's just, I mean, you talked about it, and I know he wasn't as rock solid last season as you would want. And his numbers, like 3.22 ERA, it's not great for a closer, but it's still, you see good relievers have seasons that you can't explain where they have an ERA of 5.
Right.
And it just happens for whatever reason. And I think it also says a lot that he had that season he had and said that's not acceptable. And he spent a lot of time this offseason working on his body, his lower half, getting as strong as he could. And he's been unbelievable. I don't know about you because I'm rooting for different things in the press box. Like, please don't screw this up so my story still makes sense. But when the 9th inning happens, I mean, there's no, like, even with good closers, like Cody Allen was a really good closer here for a while. And he made 9th innings really interesting. Chris Perez, even at his peak, would make every 9th inning interesting. And then when he wasn't at his peak, even more interesting. Clase, it's like you don't even think twice. You just think the game's over.
The only other guy in since I've been watching the team every day since 2011 that I ever felt this way about was Andrew Miller in his brief time here. That was it. When Andrew Miller came up to the mound, you're like, okay, that's it. But he wasn't really closing, obviously. But you felt that like they can't hit him, and that's what is going on with Clase. And they put the ball in play against him, obviously, but it's like there's never hard contact. It's not like he's being saved by the defense game in and game out. He's just creating soft contact every single time. It is nuts. He's fantastic. And it's funny, you mentioned that at the beginning of that year that he and Karinchak were both pitching well. And you think about where those guys' careers have gone since the middle of that season. I mean, Karinchak's been a disaster. Both on and off it's unfair to say he's a disaster off the field, but he puts his foot in his mouth sometimes. And he has been hurt. He's been mostly bad when he has pitched since then. And Clase has become the guy in baseball. I mean, there's not an argument right now who the best closer in baseball is. I don't even think you can make a case for anybody else over the last few years. All right, go ahead, Zach.
No, I was just going to say, it'll be interesting. We've talked a little bit about the Cy Young race, and Tarik Skubal, if he can avoid a September swoon, it's his.
Yeah.
But you're seeing more discussion about it. I wrote a story yesterday about Clase's path to a Cy Young. I spent a lot of time talking to Zach Britton, who had very similar numbers to what Clase is doing this year in 2016, and a similar situation because Rick Porcello won, but his numbers were not better than Verlander or Corey Kluber that year. And those three were all kind of similar. You could have made a case for Britton to win it. And Britton was saying the one thing that he thought held him back, because he had an 0.54 ERA, 47 for 47 in saves, but I think he had like 74 strikeouts in 67 innings. So like Clase, like he threw a sinker. He was getting a lot of ground balls. And Britton felt like if he had 100 strikeouts, just like a flashy number that's going to get voters' attention, he thought he could at least get top two. Instead, he finished fourth behind those three starters. So, if that holds true, I mean, Clase is not going to get to 100 strikeouts. He probably needs to avoid giving up another run. And then I think he needs a couple poor starts out of Skubal. But the crazy part is it is setting up well. After Skubal, there's like 10 starting pitchers who all have almost identical numbers, and their ERA is like 3.12, and it's hard to differentiate between them. So I wonder if that could help Clase. Even if he doesn't win, maybe he can finish second.
Yeah, I as much as I love Clase, I could not vote for him over Tarik Skubal personally, but I would pick him second. I just think, and maybe that's crazy because you're like, well, one of the main reasons obviously is because one guy's pitched 150 innings and one guy's pitched 50 innings, give or take, and that's a big part of it. I think the other pitcher, Skubal's the only one that's been dominant all season long as a starting pitcher. The others have been, somewhat up and down. They've been very good, but not dominant. Obviously, Clase has been beyond dominant. But if Skubal gets blown up in September, things could change. I think if Skubal has a bad September, Clase could win the Cy Young. I just right now, I know Skubal's team is, although they're over 500 now, good for them. But the only argument against Skubal is that the Tigers are not in playoff contention, and to me, that's not enough for me to vote against him. I don't have a vote, but yeah. By the way, oddly enough, in that year where Zach Britton finished fourth in the Cy Young, he finished 11th in the MVP voting.
He brought that up, yeah.
And none of those starters got more votes than him for MVP.
It's very strange, and that's why it's a difficult thing to analyze, because and I will be the first to say, like, our voting body does not get things right every year.
No, that's true.
At the BBWA,
the Rick Porcello thing was crazy.
Yeah,
if I remember, the advanced stats on him were not great.
I voted Verlander that year. I actually had a Cy Young vote and didn't include Britton on my ballot, which I didn't realize until the end of the interview, and so I made sure I ended that interview pretty quickly before he found that out. But I regret that, though. I don't remember my thought process at the time. I will say, like, it's difficult if you want to put like Logan Gilbert second and Clase third and Seth Lugo fourth. Like, I don't understand how Clase could be better than one of those starters and not all of them, because they all have similar numbers.
Yeah.
But the other thing, no relievers won the Cy Young since 2003. Eric Gagne. And
there were some good strikeouts that year.
He had 137 strikeouts. He had this crazy save streak. I think he converted 84 in a row over a couple of years. There's some narrative baked into it too. And there were some really good starting pitching candidates that year. Jason Schmidt had a really good season. Your boy Mark Pryor was really good. So it's tough to predict, because who knows what Fred Jones, the voter in Tacoma, Washington, who covers the Mariners part-time, thinks about Cy Young credentials, right? there are some voters who will probably never vote for a reliever.
Yes.
There's some voters who are going to look at advanced statistics that may or may not favor Clase. There's some voters who are just going to look at who has the most wins. And
God, please don't tell me there's still people doing that.
I mean, I think they still exist. So
oh my God.
we'll see. It's tough to predict, but Clase's got an interesting case.
Yeah. Oh, my man Jay Crawford asked me the other day how many wins Scooble has, and I was just like, oh. Although he does have I think 15 wins, which this day and age for a mediocre team is pretty good.
I think he currently has the pitching triple crown, which probably should be adjusted because it's wins, ERA, and strikeouts.
Yeah.
I mean, he deserves it without question. Yeah. But if he has a bad September and the Tigers are monitoring his workload, we'll see.
Interestingly enough, hopefully it's not a sign of things to come. Basically 2 years after Eric Gagne won that Cy Young, and 2 years after Zach Britton was in the mix for Cy Young, they were 2 years later. They were started their downhill, and they were never really that good after that. They both got injured a lot. I think, in fact, the next year Gagne actually finished 7th for the Cy Young, and then he got hurt, and he was mediocre. I think Zach Britton got off to a good start the following year, and then got hurt. And then he was just never really the same after that. He was always getting hurt, but hopefully that won't happen here. All right, some comments from the fans in the YouTube chat. Mr. King says, Dodgers the best team in baseball. Good morning from L.A. Dodger fans getting ready for a ring. I mean, Mr. King, you guys have the largest payroll in baseball forever. You've won one World Series since the 80s, and that was a completely fraudulent World Series. I don't consider the COVID World Series equal to others. I know it was, to me, there's an asterisk on the COVID World Series.
What if the Guardians or Cubs would have won it?
I would still feel, well, I can't say for sure how I would have felt if I'm going to be totally honest about it, but I feel like it's totally tainted. I felt the Lakers winning the NBA championship that year is totally tainted. There's no fans. It was, was there fans in the World Series now? I can't remember.
Yeah, spread out, but it was played in the neutral field in Texas. Right?
It was, that was lame. And with all the money they've spent, and the Dodgers could very well win the World Series this year. I think they're the best team in baseball. I think the Phillies are really good, obviously.
Can Shohei go 50-50?
Well, yes, I think he can, right? He's 42-42, which no player's ever done. And so 8 home. I mean, the steal should be easy if he wants them. What's amazing is I got him with the 11th pick of my fantasy draft.
Because he wasn't pitching this year, people thought, let's forget him?
I think what happened was at the time they were still doing the investigation on the gambling thing.
Oh, yeah.
I think some of the other guys were scared that he might get suspended. And by the time it was my pick at 11, I'm like, I can't pass on him. This is too crazy. And oddly enough, I've been in this league for a long time. And my last time I won the championship, I finished, top 5 win money. I've been in the money a bunch of times, but I have not won a championship since 2001. And in 2001, my best player was Ichiro, and now my best player is Shohei. So it's been suggested to me that I change my name to team name to the Nippon Ham Fighters or, some Japanese team league. I also have Seiya Suzuki and Shota Imanaga. So heavy Japanese influence on my team. Let's see. B. Skrills, after a well, vote is starting to soon. I think he's starting to say that vote is starting to sound like a broken record.
Yeah, and I thought he was a little more forthright, candid after Tuesday's game.
Right.
Which he should, we're tired of asking the same things and tired of trying to get him to admit that this is concerning. And
right.
Finally he did. But it is a day by day thing. I'll be very curious to hear. I mean, it depends on how the season shakes out, but just what after the season, reflecting on things, what the tenor is then.
Yeah. And the thing right now is to me, not including the bullpen, your five most important non-bullpenners, in no particular order, are Jose, Josh Naylor, Quan, Bybee, and Gavin Williams. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's your core.
And none of them are playing well. None. Yeah. So whether they get hot here, whether they can win in the playoffs, it's about those five guys. Those five guys got to be playing well. Because, I mean, Lively's doing fine, and Lively, and whether it's Boyd or Cobb at the back of the rotation in the playoffs, I think that's fine. And we know that the bottom of the lineup is probably going to struggle. So those five guys got to play like all-star caliber players. It's a lot to ask, I think, for Williams and Bybee, but they're capable. But they're all five of those guys are struggling, and they got to get going, and especially Bybee and Williams, because they have not pitched well here lately.
I think the story of the season is that, look, none of us thought that 107 win pace was sustainable. When they were 51-26, we weren't saying, yeah, this team's going to set some records. No. But what it does is it buys you time to get out in front. There was regression coming, but you had time to get out in front and do what you needed to do to make sure that regression didn't hit harder than it should.
Right.
And their approach was to rely on the young guys to take the next step, and nobody has. Giancarlo Noel, and that's it. So your stagnancy and the fact that there hasn't been development is what has gotten you to this point. And you're still trotting out a lineup every day that includes a shortstop who hasn't hit all season. In many cases, whoever's in center field hasn't hit all season. Catching, you haven't gotten production there all season. David Fry, who hasn't been able to hit anyone, especially righties, for a couple months because he might be injured, but not injured enough to go on the injured list. I don't know. Yeah, and then your stars aren't hitting. So, I mean, this was the route you chose, and this is how you're paying for it.
And they've just not developed any of their hitting prospects. Tyler Freeman, Brian Rocchio, Gabriel Arias have all played a lot the last 2 years, and none of them have shown you anything offensively. There's, and not only have these guys to this point not panned out, I'm not going to completely write off any of them because they haven't played enough, but some of these guys had all this trade value a year ago, 2 years, and now they don't. Mm-hmm. Like what kind of trade value to get Gabriel Arias and Tyler Freeman and Brian Rocchio have? They were top prospects. They have no trade value. Bo Naylor to some degree too. I mean, he, and you refuse to trade them. You haven't developed them. The guys we want to see now, Manzardo, DeLauder, Valera, they don't call them up. I don't know. And Corey asks, will they use the guys they call up? I don't know. Who are you anticipating they'll call up when the rosters expand on Sunday?
Alex Cobb.
Right.
And then, I mean, I don't know. They could do something with the other reliever spot. I don't know how long Eric Sabrowski will stay on the roster.
Right.
I think it'll be either Valera or Manzardo. I think Valera fits their roster better because of their insistence to keep playing Fry, but not having him play outfield or catcher.
Yeah.
But I don't think Manzardo is the next Jim Thome, but I don't know what another few weeks in Columbus and then
nothing
seeing him in April is going to do to help his development or your team. Yeah. So I don't know. It'll be one of the two, I think. Gabriel Arias has been better at AAA.
You know what? If he's been better, give him another shot over Rocchio. It's not like Rocchio's doing anything. I would give him another shot. I would call up Manzardo and Valera. I would send down, either Freeman or Schneemann, one of the Emans.
Schneemann's actually been hitting better lately. Freeman has he gotten hot once this year?
No. Yeah. And what I would do right now, because Fry's been terrible, is I would essentially platoon Fry and Manzardo, although I'd let Manzardo play some at first base. But I'd have a platoon there and then have Valera play against righties in the outfield. I mean,
Yeah. The easy answer here is say you don't need 2 utility players off the bench. You can
Right.
sacrifice a little defensive versatility,
Yeah.
and you go Brennan and Thomas platoon in center,
Yeah.
Valera and Noel platoon in right,
Yep.
Fry and Manzardo platoon at DH
Yeah.
/ first
Now
base.
that cuts. The only negative about that is it cuts down on John Kenzie's at bats.
Yeah, but he can find ways to get in the lineup. The other
Right.
thing too is like you can pinch hit for your shortstop, your catcher, or whoever.
That's right. That's right. You still get John Kenzie at bats, and that would be. I mean, that would be a lot better if they did all this. Will they do it? I don't know. They seem to be obsessed with Tyler Freeman. I don't get it. But all right, let's get a few more comments here. Buckeye guy, Guardians need to sweep the Buccos. Yes, they do. Ryan says, get Freeman out of here. He's a defensive liability at shortstop. Should have never called off Jose and then dropped the ball. He's of no use up here. Let's see. AVC says, I feel if they call it Manzardo, he'll get some decent playing time. He's a doubles machine. And let's see, who do we got here? Eddie, do the Guardians have a way that the minority owner can buy more than he agreed in order to get the Dolans out faster? There supposedly is going to be a changing of the guard in the next few years. I don't know. I don't know if the new owner is going to spend any more money than the Dolans have.
Nobody knows. He's just lurking in the shadows for another couple of years.
Yep. All right, that's going to do it. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Zach, great stuff as always. Got to get a sweep. We come on Monday. If they lose this series to the Pirates, I mean,
need some funeral music or what? What can we get?
But they got to sweep. I guess I could live with 2 out of 3, but they really need to sweep this. There's no excuse. The Pirates stink. They're completely falling apart. Again, the Cubs are a very shaky offensive team, and they scored 41 runs in 3 games against the Pirates, and a lot of that was against their terrible bullpen. No excuse. Zach, what are you doing this weekend besides watching the Guardians and the Pirates? Nothing? What else? What else do you have time for? Nothing.
What else would you want to do?
I have no idea. I guess you don't do it. You really don't have time to do anything else until the season's over.
Yeah,
and you're having a baby soon, so
I've got chaos. Well, that's the one thing is this office is going to be a nursery by Monday, and my office will be across the hall. So
you get kicked out of your room, but that's fair. Your wife deserves that. She's doing the hard labor here, not you. All right, we'll see everybody. Everybody have a great weekend. I'll be on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show in 1 hour and 17 minutes. Until then, we'll see you next time on the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show.